YouTube.
3:26 is the time. SicEm365 Radio. We're on until 6 o'clock tonight. Chad Brendel from Bearcat Journal 247 Sports joins us, covers Cincinnati for that website, and as well covers a program that has been pretty good. No question about it, but they're always one of those that kind of on the outside, like we've discussed with UCF or others. Chad, what is the thought in Cincinnati about the program, and are they at some point you think it'll be a fit during all of what might happen in the upcoming months and years with realignment?
Yeah, I you know what's interesting, I think, is the important part to remember here about Cincinnati is they haven't always been left out. While the Big East was kind of looked down upon as a football conference, it had automatic BCS, bids when they were there, and they got caught kind of with their pants down. They didn't prepare for what was next, and I think that influenced where you've seen the program go since all of the last round. When the music stopped and everybody had a chair, but basically Cincinnati. I think they learned from a lot of those mistakes. If you look, they spent $90 million renovating Nippert Stadium, and they spent about $100 million completely gutting and revamping Fifth Third Arena, and they've invested in infrastructure, and they've done all those things behind the scenes that Louisville did the last time. Louisville was ready, and Cincinnati wasn't, and I think they learned from those lessons. I think they've built things the right way right now, and they caught a heck of a break when they hired Luke Fickell from Ohio State, because that's worked out about as well as any hire in the country over the past decade or so.
Chad, what is their position now as the Big 12 is in flux, to say the least, and that things are changing? Like, how do they navigate this now with a potential large shakeup across the country, and maybe not just OU and Texas leaving?
I mean, if from Cincinnati's perspective, I think the most logical fit for Cincinnati, and as we're finding out, what you think is the most logical fit for you might not be actually where you end up. The ACC probably makes the most sense because you've got, similar city type schools throughout the conference. You've got some rivalries already built in with Louisville and Pitt. But ultimately they're not in a position to be picky right now. And we don't know what the ACC, if anything, what the ACC is going to do. So I think if you're Cincinnati, you're obviously looking at the Big 12. You've already gone through this once with the Big 12. So the interesting thing is there's not a whole lot of to say in Cincinnati's presentation to the Big 12. They've already made it once. And honestly, I think if the Big 12 were to have expanded back in 2016, Cincinnati was in. So I think the presidents and the people that run the 8 schools that are remaining, I think they think favorably of Cincinnati. It's a matter of now we get down into the, crunching the numbers and what kind of value do they add, and how much do they move the conference forward. But with the Big 12, you're talking about a conference that right now at 8, they can't survive at 8 if they're going to stay together. So they're going to have to make a move, and Cincinnati's positioned well if they do.
What are your thoughts on the Americans' relationship with ESPN? And obviously the reports last week that one of the ideas for these 8 remaining was to fold them into the American, not the other way around, where Cincy or UCF or whoever goes to the Big 12, but the remaining Big 12 schools actually go to the American.
I'm not a fan, personally. I know there's a lot of people in the city that don't agree with me on that, and including one of my guys that works for me on the website that I do my podcast with. But I saw what happened, 10 years ago, and the biggest mistake that Cincinnati and the remaining schools made was selling off and not keeping the Big East name, because that means something. And kids grow up. Even if Villanova's gone and, St. John's is gone, the Big East name meant something. And it allowed those basketball schools to land on their feet because they had a name that had some some juice. The American didn't have any juice. You know how many kids grew up wanting to play in the American Athletic Conference? Zero. None. Not one. There's not one kid that's ever grown up and been like, man, I just want to play in the American. And I think you're repeating history if you try to fold the Big 12 teams into the American Athletic Conference. You're again wasting a chance to take a brand that has built up equity, that has built up a name, even if it's not, the same as it was with Texas and Oklahoma. There are still kids that are going to resonate with the Big 12, and it's still going to mean something. I just don't like, and maybe another 10 years from now, we look back and say, man, the American really made a name for itself. We took that gamble once. I didn't like the path that it took things on.
Knowing that it is every man for himself and kind of the jungle that is college football, do they have allies, though? Do they have people that would be like, okay, look, we'll come with you, like, let's do this together?
I don't think so, because I think this group is so new together. I mean, the only schools that are left from the Big East are Cincinnati and South Florida. UConn left, and Louisville left, and Rutgers left. Like, even those teams that created the American, it's hard to believe, but there's only two of those standing. So Central Florida, they've bounced in and out of a conference with them throughout time, but there's no real relationship there. I mean, I guess I would say Memphis, but Memphis is flaunting FedEx dollars and doing everything it can, because Memphis has issues academically that a lot of these conferences, don't want to take on, even though they've got a pretty favorable profile in a lot of other areas. Memphis is busy solving their own problems. The only alliance, quote unquote, that would make any sense would be West Virginia and Cincinnati going to the ACC. And that's one, because of travel, and two, because of, Gordon Gee's ties to the state of Ohio. But I don't think there's anybody, if you're looking at going to the Big 12, that's ready to, Cincinnati's ready to go hand in hand with, even though you're building rivalries. I think UCF, especially with Gus Malzahn, has a chance to be a heck of a rivalry. But at the current time, I don't think that the Big 12's calling UC and they're like, hey, can we bring Central Florida with us?
Yeah.
I don't see that as likely.
I didn't realize this. Cincinnati's 300,000. What's the Waco population?
120,
120 or something probably. Like it's not as large as I thought, but it's still large enough. How do they do with eyeballs in the state of Ohio? Whether it's I know that's a professional state, but I also know there's Ohio State. How do they do with that?
Really well. I mean, if you look, they had, outside of the playoff, Cincinnati, Georgia was the number one bowl game. If you look at the numbers on streaming, they're number one in the American Athletic Conference in terms of getting eyeballs to ESPN Plus, which, as we are finding out, is a very important piece of this puzzle. And generally, they've been number one or number two right there with UCF in weekly who's watching their games. It's one of the largest college basketball markets every year in Cincinnati, and football has been supported here at a pretty high level. I think there was always the assumption, and that 300,000 number really is a little bit different because there's about 1.2 million in the metro area. And so that's Cincinnati in particular. But if you go into the suburbs and northern Kentucky, which is where I know people find this hard to believe, the Cincinnati airport is in Kentucky. Yeah. But it's about 1.2 million in the metro area. So, there's a lot more eyeballs than people think when you just look at the raw data. When you dig a little bit deeper, there's and it's growing because Cincinnati, if we're being honest, up until Brian Kelly got here, nobody paid attention to Cincinnati football. And now you're building on 10, 12, going on 15 years where the football program has mattered, and the football program is still on the upswing. It's still growing.
And by the way, I did fly into Cincinnati, Paul. Remember, I covered women's basketball against in Lexington, I believe, is where I flew in. It is. You're right.
Chad, would moving into a P5 conference maybe solidify, even if it was 3 years from now, solidify Luke Fickell a little bit more, or is that something that Bearcat fans are just going to have to white knuckle until he decides to stay or go?
I mean, the thing that's interesting about Luke is he's not – I've been doing this for 25 years. I started in 1995 at Marshall with Chad Pennington and Randy Moss, and I've dealt with a lot of different coaches. Luke Fickell's different in that he's not an ego guy. He's not driven by the climb. You know, we saw that with Brian Kelly and Butch Jones couldn't – Butch Jones tried to climb faster than he could climb, which is why he fell. But – we've been so accustomed to coaches trying to climb and leave that's how, you know, you've conditioned yourself in this sport. Luke Fickell's got 6 kids. One of them's now on his roster as a scholarship offensive lineman. His family's happy here. He's never really left Ohio. Are there jobs Luke Fickell would leave for? Absolutely. But that number, I think, is really, really small. I mean, Ohio State, yes. Notre Dame, yes. Could maybe Penn State convince him? Possibly, but I don't know that, you know, Happy Valley has the private schooling and the things that his wife would be looking for. His wife was a big reason that they turned down Michigan State because she just didn't see what the family, you know, kind of desired in East Lansing. As long as they can continue to show him that they are progressing in the athletic department and that they're taking steps forward. The next step is going to be a true indoor practice facility that they're already talking about to donors and starting to plan and raise money for. As long as it feels like that he has the support of the athletic department and the community, I think it's going to be pretty hard to get him out of here. It's going to have to be a really, really good situation. And the community's been very lucky because Luke Fickell, even though he's from Columbus, is very much a Cincinnati guy, and this city has fallen in love with him pretty fast. It doesn't hurt that they've won 31 games in 3 years, though. I'll give you that. I
want to go on record. I want Cincinnati, Memphis, if there's any additions. Those are two cities I want to cultivate. I mean, here's somebody that just put. I know you want to follow up, Paul, on the chat line. Cincinnati, the Metro, is over 2 million. Waco's 260,000, but the problem is right now Waco's still on the inside looking out, where others are bigger are on the outside looking in.
Yeah. Chad, just comparatively to Luke Fickell, what are your memories of now Senator Tommy Tuberville?
Tommy was very good to me, so I'm not going to say anything bad. I do think that there is a different level of work you have to put in at a place that's on the rise. And he had never really been at a place that was on the rise. When you really dig into it, here's where I think Tommy got himself in trouble. When he first got to Cincinnati, he had a really good staff. And Tommy's kind of a CEO coach. I mean, he would come over in the middle of practice and stand and talk to us media guys for like 40 minutes about whatever, you know, just my assistant coaches have got it. I'm going to, you know, be Tommy Tuberville and go hang out. Well, as he started losing coaches, like, you know, he lost the Steve Klingscale and his name's escaping me. He just got let go as the offense, Eddie Gran, Kentucky. And as he lost guys, he replaced them with great assistants and guys that didn't have a whole lot of experience and didn't really fit with, you know, if you're going to be a CEO head coach, you better have veteran assistants. And as he got younger and younger on the assistant side, he never really stepped up his, you know, day-to-day operation to make those guys better. And that's why you saw, I mean, they won 9 games his first year, 9 games his second year. Then they're at 6 or 7 wins that third year before it completely fell off a cliff. But if you were paying attention to the details, that's, I think, where Tommy got himself in a lot of trouble, is he did not keep a close eye on the fact that you're 1 or 2 seasons at the level Cincinnati's at, you're 1 or 2 seasons from falling off a cliff. And he walked right off of it and didn't realize it was happening.
Well, he has an easier job now. He doesn't really
much easier now.
Yeah.
I always thought he fit that role he's in now. And again, he's had success at places he's been. But think about the last 5 head coaches. Mark D'Antonio and where he is, Brian Kelly, Butch Jones is at Liberty now, right? And I know he's been up and down around wherever he's
Arkansas State.
Arkansas State, I'm sorry, which is a hell of a football team, and they're dangerous when you get them on the non-conference schedule. Tommy Tuberville and Luke Fickell, they've done well. And that's why you said that's why they've been more relevant. I
started in the middle of the D'Antonio era. So I've been here through almost all of it, and it's been especially when you consider Bob Huggins was the basketball coach for almost 20 years, and then Mick Cronin was here for 13, and the John Brandon era didn't really work, but there's been so much stability on the basketball side, but on football, it's just been a constant kind of churn of guys moving up the ladder or, becoming a politician.
Hey, Chad, thank you. Are you concerned about the future of what might be with those who are not the haves and the have-not in college football?
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, I think you have to be because, again, it's a very high-stakes game of musical chairs. Cincinnati has been in a position where the music stopped and they didn't have a spot. So they are well aware that they have to get this one right. And I think that's why you saw such a commitment when they got left out the last time, that we've got to show these people that when the music starts playing again, we've got a landing spot. We've got a place that can keep us fighting, keep us relevant as this thing moves forward. If they end without a landing spot again, if the music stops and they don't have a chair, it is personally, as a business owner, I'm terrified of what it means because, I've spent a lot of time building this thing, and I can't imagine. The good news is I think they're in as good a position as anybody can possibly be for the teams that are looking for a spot.
It's a great way to put it. It's not just what Cincinnati football or the university or whoever, the alumni, the base, whatever, but also even the businesses in your particular case when you cover Bearcat football and sports. Thanks for your time, Chad. Great stuff. Appreciate your time.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me. Call me anytime.
Yes, and hopefully we call you maybe down the road if there's something that's even a glimmer of hope of what might change, if anything. Chad Brendel, Bearcat Journal, 247 Sports. I think we can relate to what he just said. The fact that we started this new show back in April of 2020 at the start in the teeth of COVID, and who knew what was going on? And here we are now a year and a half later. A YouTube channel has exploded because of the great audience we have. And yeah, I mean, honestly, if the Baylor is no longer a Power 5, it does possibly change how many eyeballs we have or how many people are a part of what SicEm365.com, which has become the place to go for Baylor information as well.